Hello, and welcome back to the STEM Space podcast. I am excited to introduce you to today's guest. We have David Richards here with us, who's the founder and CEO of Changemaker Education. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here, and I cannot wait to hear more of your story. I was just telling you off mics that I was just reading through your bio, and I have a lot more questions than the ones that I sent you to talk about. But so feel free to just speak your mind on any
Yes.
topics that come up. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I always describe myself as a banker turned educator turned entrepreneur. And that's how I describe myself because I started out teaching Spanish in a middle school without any training. It was like part time. So I didn't need a certification. And I really, I realized at that moment how incredibly difficult teaching is, especially middle schoolers.
Yeah.
I ran away. I ran away as far as I could. And I went into banking because I was like, this is way too hard and I'm not getting paid enough. Right. And so from there, I decided I went into corporate banking. I worked 2 blocks from the White House, had this fancy suit, a great job. I was on my way to the management track, but I just didn't feel alive inside. I just kind of felt bored and just not interested. And I was more excited with tutoring Ethiopian immigrants at night, coaching basketball on the weekends. And so I felt like I got to make a change. So when I turned 30, I quit my job at the bank and went back to teaching and ended up teaching in Oakland public schools and really went back in for a real challenging assignment and fell in love with the kids. And then I found this great charter school that was just starting out about 20 years ago. And at that point, it was one small high school at the back of a big high school's campus. We had a couple modulars, and we ended up having this big vision to build this kind of revolutionary education model. And that model is now in 300 schools across the country. So I went from teacher to principal to chief schools officer with that organization and scaled it up and shared it out across, like I said, across the country. And then I ended up feeling like I really want to be back with the kids in the community. And so I started a charter school really close to my own home so that my kids could attend it when they were little. And so I started a K-8 out here in Sacramento, and that's in its 10th year. And then while I was starting that charter school, I started falling in love with microschools. I was like, if we could do smaller schools and really have relationship based and intimacy and just really make sure everybody knows each other and the family's really involved. And so as I was building that school, I started following other micro schools. And this was 10 years ago, and there weren't that many. And now it's become a whole thing. And so as time went on, I started consulting and I started working with microschool founders. I started helping them open microschools across the country. And then I had this idea that we could actually build a network of microschools and support founders to be autonomous to open their own microschools under our umbrella, but they're actually their own separate microschool. And it's like the best of both worlds because they get our support, they're part of our network, but they have full autonomy to run the school that they think is best for kids.
Wow. That is incredible. So thank you, first of all, for all the work that you've done because you've impacted so many kids. Those numbers, I just can quickly see that escalate in the number of lives reached for the better. And just to know that so often we talk to different teachers and realize that teachers are born and not made. So there's
Yes.
always people that will say, oh, well, I took the unconventional path of I was this and then I became a teacher.
Mhm.
It's like, no, you were always actually a teacher. It just
Yes.
took a while to realize it. And that's true of our story that we've shared in the podcast before. I was an engineer before and then
Yes.
volunteered. On my free time, I realized that I just loved working with kids. And so then you eventually like,
Yes.
oh, that's what I should be doing most of the time. So
Exactly.
I
Yep. I love
I
it.
love your story there. And jumping into middle school, that is really scary. So
Yes, it is.
I feel yeah. So I am new to this idea of schools. My own
Mhm.
children go to a very small school in the rural town that we live in Texas. And so I
Mm.
understand the value of that close-knit community of a school. Can you
Yeah.
tell me more about what exactly is a micro school? How is that defined?
Yeah, so there is a National Microschool Center now, and that is a national organization that's provided a definition. And the way I like to simplify the definition is it's really about the size, because people will be like, oh, is it a public school? Is it a private school? Is it a charter school? Is it this? Is it that? Is it a homeschool? So if it is 5 to 150 kids, it's considered a micro school. So your rural school that your kids go to right now could be technically a micro school if there's less than 150 kids. And actually, I've heard some people say up to 200 kids. So that's the easiest way to define it. And then within that definition of, okay, the size of the school makes it a micro school. They're funded and governed in different ways. So there are some that are private tuition entirely. There are others that are private tuition plus, states like Texas now have a voucher program, and other states have vouchers or education savings accounts. So there might be a private tuition model that the parents are paying almost no tuition because the state has a voucher program. And then there are some micro schools that are, a lot of the public school districts now are starting to create their own micro schools. That's becoming a thing. And now the charter schools are starting to asking, how can we create more micro schools within our network? So you're starting to see a lot of different micro school configurations, but it's really just a smaller version of a school is like the simplest definition.
Okay. And so since there's such a variety and talking about how the population size that makes it a micro school in this network, how are they all connected? Like what is the value that they're helping each other with?
Yeah, so one of the things when we launched, so we're in our second year, when we launched Changemaker Education, we really wanted it to be a values aligned network, but not a command and control network. So a lot of school districts are still operating on like 1930s management science, right? Command and control. Like there's a superintendent, there's 10 people below the superintendent, and then there's another 5 people, another 20 people. So there's sometimes in a bigger district, maybe 150 people between the decisions that are being made and the teacher that's implementing them, which is just crazy. And so what we wanted to do, because the teachers know best, right? They're the ones with the kids every day. So what we wanted to do is create an organization where the teachers actually get to decide, hey, this is what we think is best for kids. But we wanted those values to undergird what draws us in and what holds us together. And so our core values are really about equity, autonomy, love, and community. So those are the core values. And we need you to believe that we're trying to shift the paradigm of education. So that means it's not 40 kids in a classroom with a teacher standing at the front in individual desk and rows. It's self-directed learning or personalized learning. It's experiential learning, some version of project-based learning. And then we have a social emotional learning curriculum that focuses on the mind, body, and soul. That is the piece that also unites us and draws us together. So when we advertise and we look for our founders, they're already kind of self-selecting into the mind, body, soul piece, the self-directed piece, and the project-based learning piece, and then our vision of shifting the paradigm of education. So it allows us to have a real connected, unifying theme around our values.
Wow. That's great. So how do you communicate? Is this something where you're providing curriculum? Is there any kind of meetings that are working together regularly with the teachers and keeping everybody up to date? How does this work?
Yeah, so we have a comprehensive program, and we start in the fall, and we spend a whole year with you, and you're in a cohort program. So you have about 11 or 12 months, twice a month virtually with your cohort, twice a month with individual coaching sessions, and then a bank of resources and a bunch of other things you need to open your microschool. And so we essentially keep you on track, give you all the tools to be successful. And one of our founders said, you guys gave me there's no reason for an excuse anymore. Like you've given me all the tools, the roadmap, the pathway, the support, the community. So there's really no reason why I can't do it anymore.
Which is huge because I think teachers were used to just having to adapt basically daily, maybe even hourly on, oh, I was just given some other task or assignment or even a new job, or the day before the school year starts, you're like, oh, actually you're teaching a different grade level.
Yeah.
So to have those kind of resources is so meaningful. And I'm sure that it makes a big difference in the number of micro schools that are now popping up and word of mouth as this is changing the game of education. So that's amazing. What kind of impact have you seen from these micro schools that you've helped start?
Yeah, what's really fascinating is, the Microschool Center actually releases a report, and something like 60%, I believe, 60% of microschools do some version of self-directed learning. And you're kind of like, that's interesting, because in most traditional schools, you're not seeing much self-directed learning at all, right? Unless it's like a Montessori school or something. And
Mhm.
so it's fascinating to see how just the size of the microschool and the infrastructure of smaller class sizes, smaller communities is actually changing the way that we're doing instruction, right? So now we're talking about like a redux of the one room schoolhouse. It's like multi-age, right? Older kids mentoring younger kids, parents coming in and volunteering. And so you're seeing a much more personalized experience for the kids. And that's what we're seeing in our micro schools, is that a lot of our founders will come in and be like, oh, I want to do, like start with first grade, do a K-5. And then by like month 2, they're not even talking in grade levels anymore. They're like, okay, we want to do 5 to 12-year-olds. And I've been talking with families and they have 3 siblings, 3 kids. And if I only start with kindergarten, first grade, then I can't help the third grader. And so I'm getting out of the factory model mindset. And now I want to just say, let's bring these kids in. We'll bring 15 kids in, K through 5, which is really 5 through 12-year-olds. And we're going to meet them where they're at. And we're going to be able to, a lot of homeschool parents will tell you that you can do the academic piece in like 2 hours a day. Like you really can. So in a micro school, you're seeing a lot of people, and this same with ours, you're seeing a lot of people, a lot of educators spend the time really instructing where they need to be, right? Really personalized. And then that gives you like 3, 4, 5 hours the rest of the day to go out and be in nature, to run your own business, start a YouTube channel, go create a project, deal with a community service problem, whatever it may be the kids are into. And so it's just like this aliveness that you're seeing in the schools, because they're not stuck in these kind of like 45-minute classes, 55-minute classes, 40 kids in a class, or like one elementary school where they're just sitting still for the whole entire day.
Yes, because we know from decades of research that that's not the best way for children to learn. It's just that our
No.
education system has not caught up, except
Yes.
for what you're doing with micro schools. So that's incredible. Um, so if an educator is listening to this and they're thinking, yeah, this sounds like a dream, where do I start?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting because we have gotten so much interest. So we're in our second year. And when we put up our first, like put up the website and put up our first job announcement, like, hey, do you want to open a micro school? I got 2,500 applications in 12 weeks. And I was like, let me just see if I can find a few people and test it out. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, what am I going to do? And so we have had so much interest that it's really hard to keep up. But it's really simple what you do. So you go to changemakereducation.com, all one word. You go to the website and you can click on apply. And then there's a really simple application you can fill out. And you can also download our launch guide. So you can put in your email, download the PDF, and it'll give you an overview of the things I mentioned around like what our program looks like, what are the supports you get, a little bit, a highlight of the SEL curriculum. And once you do that, then you've kind of, just like any job application, right? Now you're in the system, and we'll reach out to you and we'll take it from there.
That sounds really easy, maybe even too easy. I think the first
It's very easy.
the first thing that I think teachers always do when they walk into a program is they're thinking, first of all, where do I get funding for this? What do I
Mm-hmm.
need to do with
Mm-hmm.
funding? And
Mm-hmm.
then am I going to have all the resources, or what do I need to come in this with? So how would you answer those 2 questions?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating because people think about starting a school in terms of like, okay, the way a district starts a school is it might take them 10 years, right? They're going to do their listening sessions. They're going to have, 200 board meetings. They're going to do all the things they need to do and bring in a lot of red tape. They're going to have to build a facility, finance facility, do a bond measure. Like it's such a process. And then you see like charter schools opening, and they might take like 2 or 3 years to open. So they kind of streamline that process a little bit, but it still takes a while. A micro school is like, think about your small private preschool down the street. It does not take that long to open because you don't need this huge building. You don't need all of this. It's very simple. It's like 15 kids, getting 15 kids together. And so what I tell people when they ask those 2 questions, like, how do I fund it and what resources do I need? I was like, okay, funding's not a problem. Once you get the students to enroll, then you have a small business and now you don't need funding. Right. So it's a paradigm shift of even thinking about that, because a lot of people say, well, do you help us get grants? Do you help us get, scholarships or whatever, like things to pay to get this open? I'm like, you don't need that much money to get it open. Like maybe partner with a church or community center. You're going to need some marketing materials, which nowadays with Canva and other, you're not spending like thousands of dollars, maybe $5,000 or $10,000, maybe 20,000 if you really want to go all in on the marketing to open your micro school. And then people do GoFundMe's to get that money. There's a couple of Microschool foundations that will give you like $10,000 to kind of get that going. And then in terms of, the other funding, again, once you open, we help you with your budget model. If you have a tuition that's reasonable, then you have a budget model. And now you have a small business. You have 15 kids paying, X amount of tuition annually, and that's your business. Pay yourself, you pay another teacher or two, get an aide, and you have a microschool.
Wow. You really took a lot of the stress out of this equation. I can tell you've done this a lot.
Yes, I have.
So besides starting schools in your free time, what is something else that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, well, I think for me, the personal and the professional are not really separated. It's like I just follow my passion, right? And so I love doing what I'm doing in the workspace, but it's like I also just love being a dad, right? So being with my kids, going to sporting events, coaching their basketball teams, being with my family, it's like to me it's all the same, right? Like helping people launch microschools is what I did with my kids for my kids 10 years ago. Like make sure they have a school that I feel proud to take them to. And that I'm not going to be one of those parents at the soccer games that's always complaining about the teacher and its principal. And I'm like, I knew that it would be really coming from these really high performing, amazing, transformative schools. When my kids were born, I was like, I knew that I couldn't put them into these very kind of mediocre schools. And so I built one for them. Right. And so for me, it's like, I really love to help people open microschools. It's like my hobby, right? So, but aside from that, I do a lot of meditation and a lot of exercise, and then spending time with my family.
Oh, that sounds like right in line with what you're doing with all the schools, and you're very consistent with your work. I would imagine that when you're on the sidelines of a sporting event for your children, that not many parents want to come and complain to you because you'll just be like, well, let's just fix it.
They
Because
know,
that's
they
what you
know.
do.
Yeah.
I love that
They
so
know.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you also have a podcast, is
Yes.
that right? Where can our listeners find more information about what you have to say?
Yeah, so I started the podcast called Changemaker EDU, which is actually a good story because it's what kind of helped me get to the or launching the Changemaker Education Organization. Because I started a podcast where I was like, let me just get together and have conversations with people that want to create change in the education space. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, superintendent, whatever your role is in the system, let's just talk to people that want to create change and get great ideas out there. So I started that a few years ago. That was the intention of the podcast. And then as I moved into the microschool space, I was like, oh, now this is going to be a podcast about microschools, but it's still, the ethos is still creating change, finding your passion. Like I said, for me, it's not separate. So finding the passion within yourself that really drives you, and then saying like, oh, I really want to create change in the education space by doing this. And so now we're kind of focusing more on microschools in the podcast, but I just talk to really interesting people that have really interesting ideas, whether it's a microschool. We have our founders on there, so you can hear about what they've experienced. Last time I had the one that just came out today was a superintendent that had all these really cool ideas. He started a Montessori school within his district, and he's like, you got to talk to every superintendent that wants to do something interesting around their district, because they will bring you in and your organization, Changemaker, and they'll want to do it in their district. So I was like, I don't have time for that. But those are the types of people that I talk to. They just have these big ideas. And so I think the podcast is really fun, and you'll see kind of different ways to create change. And then hopefully it'll inspire you as the listener to be like, oh, I'm not a superintendent, so I can't like bring in a whole new microschool set. But oh, I'm a mom who can go and maybe volunteer at a microschool, or maybe go find a teacher and start one. Or I'm a teacher who can, start a program within a program or whatever. So we just try and put out whatever inspires you to create change, because we really have to do something about the traditional education system that every other industry in the world has actually changed with the times, but for whatever reason, ours has not. And so we just have to do something to shake it up.
100% agree with you on that. That's amazing. Yeah, definitely go take a listen to his podcast. And we're the STEM space, and part of what we do with Vivify is we provide STEM curriculum. So we are an engineering education provider, and everything we talk about is how to get kids to push past failure, how to be critical thinkers, how to think like an engineer, even if they're not going to be one, which we're definitely against promoting every child should be an engineer or whatever the factory system wants to push them to be. But I think it is so valuable to talk about how we're not just changing our students' minds and the way they think about school, and how the rigor of certain classroom environments does not translate into what the real world looks like. And we need to provide more of this real world experience in the classroom. And it's important for us to also be modeling that as well. So I think what you're talking about with micro schools and changing the paradigm of education fits so beautifully in what we're trying to do in just this microcosm of the STEM classroom is what we typically
Yes, that's
focus
great.
on.
Yeah.
But it's really what the buzzword of STEM is really just talking about the real world and how all of us fit into it to solve problems together. So you're
Yes.
solving big problems that I hope that maybe the STEM teachers out there who are teaching their students to solve problems, maybe it'll get them
Yes.
thinking about how they could solve the bigger picture problem of education as well.
I
So,
love it. And we do have a STEM or STEAM based school in Chicago. One of our micro schools is focused on that. It's a middle school
okay.
for STEAM and STEM, and she's really amazing. So people should check it out if they're in Chicago.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for being here and sharing your passion with us. Are there any other takeaways that our listeners should learn from your story or your work?
Yeah, I always share at the end of a podcast that I really think people should follow what they really believe and follow their passion. So I feel like as educators, we did this because not for the money, obviously. We did it because we hopefully, right? Hopefully because we love kids, hopefully because we love teaching, we love our subject, whatever it may be. But we're doing it because we want to create change, help people, make the world a better place. And so I always tell people like follow that passion. And if you're sitting right now in a spot where you're like, I'm not passionate about education anymore, then think about what will bring that passion back to you. So maybe it's still staying in the same job, but you're doing something different or switching. Just think about what you could do to bring the passion, because my belief is if we can bring as many people to reignite that passion that they had for education in the first place, if we get more and more people reigniting that passion, our kids are going to benefit tremendously.
Yes, that's great advice. And I appreciate you so much for sharing and continuing to share your passions with the world and making a difference everywhere. So thank you so much, David. And if you have more questions, please visit the links in our show notes. If you're listening to this right now to learn more about Changemaker education and the work that David Richards has started in this shift in education. But for now, STEM Space out.